Hi, this is part 2 of my review featuring the Symbaroum Monster Codex. If you haven't seen part 1, please check out the link in the description below. In this part of the review, we are going to take a look at the Monsters and Adversaries part of the Codex. This section of the book is very interesting because you have a toolkit aspect to the Codex. You have many different adversaries and potential allies that you can use in any adventure. And for example, if you like to play Symbaroum as a solo or co-op experience that is without a game master, this is going to be a very useful section for that. You could pick and choose any sort of monster or cultural being related to your adventure, perhaps as demanded by some random tables that you have created. So now let's get started, because I'm going to give you a bit of information of every being and creature encountered in this section. You immediately notice that when compared to the first part of the Codex, these creatures are not that deep when it comes to background. Most of the information you're going to find it in the core rulebook of Symbaroum and in other modules as well. This section focuses more on the utility aspect of things. You're going to have this menagerie of all sorts of creatures that you can employ depending on the encounter, on the scene, depending on whatever happens during your Symbaroum adventures and campaigns. The first subsection features adversaries. The peoples of Ambria and Davokar are a motley bunch that do not agree on much. They do agree that they always disagree with each other, of course. They form and live in groups on several levels, from the nation or clan, to factions, guilds, and local communities, to the family or closest allies. Like the rest of the region's inhabitants, the player characters must choose their friends and foes with equal caution, as the choice of the former will inevitably create more of the latter. And just a quick reminder, this section is going to contain spoilers, so keep that in mind. First, we have the Champions of Prios. We have the Experienced Black Cloak. The Experienced Black Cloaks are the Sun Church's foremost intelligence agents and witch hunters, utterly convinced of the importance of upholding Prios' laws. Then we have the Experienced Templar. With few exceptions, all the Sun Church's Templars come from low-born families. They know how to conduct themselves, but care little for manners or etiquette when facing the Apostles of Darkness. Then we have the Flagellant. Some Black Cloaks are particularly affected by the suffering inflicted upon the world and the lawgiver. These often resort to the whip in an attempt to give their spiritual agony a physical equivalent, but may of course turn the same whip and holy wrath against the enemies of Prios. Then we have the Liturg. The Sun Church consists of numerous brotherhoods and orders, all with their own way of serving Prios. The brothers and sisters who are trusted to perform the rites and ceremonies of the church, but who are not blessed with mystical powers, are called Liturgs. Then we have information on the Thurg. Thurgs can be fanatical or reflective, hateful or affectionate, evangelical or oblivious to the world. Then we have the Whip of Prios. The Black Cloaks who are trained to join the elite witch hunters of the Whip of Prios put a greater emphasis on combat, but most, of course, also master abilities that allow them to unmask the beasts of the Eternal Night. One important detail of all of these different non-player characters is that they come, of course, with their own stats, their equipment, their abilities, but there are also specific abilities. If you want to roleplay as a member of these different factions, you have, for example, the Whip Fighter. So if you wanted to be very skilled at using a whip as a weapon, as your main form of attack, this is the perfect ability for you. Then we have information on the Ordo Magicka, starting with the Adept of the Order. Advancement from Novice to Adept requires the recommendation of a Magistrate, which in turn may require a great deal of flattery in addition to strong test scores. Then we have the Artifact Crafter. Ordo Magicka greedily guards the secret of how they learned the Troll's techniques for creating artifacts. Then we have the Master of the Order. Within Ordo Magicka, there are as many ways to the top as there are masters. What they all have in common are powerful minds and finely honed skills when it comes to exploiting their subordinate novices and adepts. Then we have details on the Magistrates. The Magistrates of Ordo Magicka are among the realm's most prominent teachers. though not the most charming. Then we have information on the novice of the order. At the very bottom of Ordo Magicka's pecking order are the novices, literate Ambrians with enough motivation and concentration to learn the mysteries of wizardry. Then we have the Panzer Alchemist. The order's chapter in Agrella produces battle-trained siege experts and alchemists. You also have a bit of information when it comes to the internal conflicts of Ordo Magicka. As Grandmaster Seldonio once said, Ordo Magicka is an assembly of greedy, self-important know-it-alls who believe they are contributing to the common good and who at times happen to be right. Then we have details on the Lords of Ambria, starting with the Bailiff. The individuals managing the lands and properties of the Highborn usually come from lesser noble houses. Their competence and disposition may vary, but with a steady voice and firm hand, they can count on the obedience of their people. Then we have information on the Knight. Knights are the lowest form of nobles in Ambria, often allotted a patch of land by some duke in order to support themselves and keep their horse and equipment in good shape. Then we have details on the Lord. For generations, the nobles of Alberator and Ambria have considered warfare to be one of many fields in which the nobility should distinguish itself. Then we have the Squire, youngsters of noble blood, hoping to become fully fledged knights or templars when they grow up. Then we have information on the people of Davokar. First, the Goblin Chieftain. Chieftains are often larger than the members of their flock, but above all, they are cunning enough to outmaneuver their competitors for power. Then we have the Goblin Shaman. The Shaman is often near the Chieftain in status and reverence, especially when they actually possess some form of mystical power. Then we have details on the Goblin Tribesmen. Ordinary tribal goblins, the young, the elderly, the berry and mushroom pickers, the weaklings, the pot stirrers, and so on. We also have the Goblin Warriors. The goblins who are chosen to serve as tribal warriors often have well-developed survival instincts. Otherwise, they are not that different from their brothers and sisters, except that they might be cockier and better fed. We also have information on the goblins in forests and towns. Some of them, because of their environment, are a bit more relaxed and calm. Some others are a bit more anxious and on the edge. Then we have details on the Monster Hunter. For centuries, the people of Davokar have had to share their world with the gods and abominations of the forest. To protect the clans from these dangerous creatures, witches and chieftains have called for the training of heroic monster hunters. Then we have information on the village witch. Few Ambrians realize that it is largely the witches who decide where barbarian settlements are built. They know which places are taboo and which must be defended. Next, we have the Wilderness Guide. Ever since the arrival of the Queen's people to the Promised Land, numerous barbarians and goblins have made a career guiding Ambrian expeditions through the forest. Then we have the Keeper Witch. The most influential and enlightened witches in Davokar are chosen to serve as keepers to the barbarian chieftains. Next, we have information on the people of the Queen. First, we have the Archer. During the Great War, the regimental archers of Alberator proved rather ineffective against the undead hordes of the Dark Lords. Many deserted, and even though much time has passed since then, rumors persist that archers in general are skittish and unreliable. Next, we have the Farmhand. Back in Alberator, it was common for ordinary people to rebel against unjust taxes and miserable living conditions, and the same is becoming more and more true for Ambria. Next, we have the Horse. The horse is by far the most common mount in Ambria and Davokar alike, and it is also used to work the fields and pull wagons and carriages. We also have the battle-trained horse. To use a horse in battle, for example with the equestrian ability, one needs a well-trained steed, an animal that can actually be a challenging opponent in itself. Next, we have the Infantryman. For the current generation of Ambrian soldiers, the war against the Dark Lords is nothing more than a story from the past. Instead, they are trained to do battle with barbarians, beasts, and each other. Next, we have the Officer. Most of Ambria's military officers are veterans from the war in Alberator, burdened by memories of lost friends and crushing defeats. Next, we have the Pikeman. As it was in Alberator, soldiers equipped with a combination of bucklers and spears or halberds make up most of the duchy's regiments and garrisons. Next, we have the Panzer. The Queen's Guard is also the kingdom's elite unit of armored warriors. Exclusive to nobles and war heroes, this troop is a glorious and renowned military force. And if you want your player character to be a bit more finesse based when wielding two-handed weapons, you have the two-handed finesse ability. Next we have the Queen's Spy. The agents of the Royal Secretarium are recruited from among House Kohinoor's most loyal allies. These spies are usually nobles with silver tongues and nimble fingers. Next we have details on the Sapper. It is often said that if you want to burn down a fort, you summon the Panzer Alchemists of Agrella, but if you want to move mountains, you turn to Her Majesty's Sapper's Corps. Another important detail to keep in mind of all of these different non-player characters is that they come with their own tactics, so the Game Master has a good guideline of how to portray them in battle. Now we have information on the Townsfolk, starting with the Artisan. Each new settlement in Umbria's border regions relies on competent artisans. Hardened by the destruction of Alberator and woven together in the newly formed guilds, these settlers are determined not to let the problems of the New World get in the way of their work. Next we have the Drug Peddler. Despite the attempts to organize Umbria's craftsmen into guilds, the alchemical practices have proven particularly difficult to control. Unscrupulous drug peddlers are purchasing elixirs from witches, sorcerers, and greedy adepts of the order to be sold on the black market. Next we have the Drunkard. Many older Umbrians are haunted by traumatic memories from the war and/or terrible failures in the new country. They often lose themselves in the bottle and use their fists to seek vengeance on the world that caused their pain. Next we have the Guard Dog. Unlike the increasingly common battle-trained Yakars, the regular guard dog is more focused on detecting and warning of threats than attacking the intruders. Then we have the Innkeeper. The Innkeepers of Umbria are used to anything. Throwing out drunkards and troublemakers is part of the job, as is creating antidotes or herbal cures for battered travelers. Then we have the Medicus. Umbrian medical expertise is not yet controlled by a certain guild. The knowledge comes from various sources, with scholars, priests, alchemists, and barbers making up the nation's motley medical community. Then we have the Noble Brat. Whether in the streets of Indaros, an army camp, or in some countryside village, it is said that a swanky young noble is never more than a stone's throw away. Then we have the Pickpocket. Pickpockets are such a common element on the city streets that most Umbrians keep money and securities in their boots, gloves, hats, and undergarments, but sacrificing a few coins in a belt pouch ensures that one does not get mugged in an alley. Then we have the Thug. Law and order shines like the sun over the Umbrian kingdom, but where there is light, there is shadow. In the dark alleys and back streets of the cities, the bored and ambitious scum of Umbria rule. Now we have a subsection featuring beasts and monsters. It is important to note that these creatures, these monsters and beasts, they have their own hunting grounds, but they tend to move between such grounds because of different unexpected events. So you must always keep that in mind. Do not expect that you're going to find a specific creature in just a few particular environments. First, we have information on the creatures found in Bright Davokar, starting with the Veamon. The black-furred bear creature known by the barbarians as the Veamon is a solitary soul that takes its dominance for granted. It certainly has many enemies, both beast and human. The Veamon is prized by the barbarians for its meat, and for many northern clans, its slaying is a coming-of-age rite. Then we have the Blaze Bug. The swarming, flesh-eating insects known as blaze bugs or blaze beetles can seemingly be found anywhere in Davokar, including its brighter parts. Then we have the Blightborne Fairy. Small, crooked, naked creatures with glossy black eyes and long claws where their nails used to be. Their skin shows hints of thin fur, and they are all surrounded by a pungent sulfuric odor. Then we have the Darak. Daraks are pack-living herbivores that normally roam the plains west of Davokar, but it is not uncommon for individual beasts to be ostracized from the herd. Then we have the Ferber. The feisty Ferber lives in families of between 4 and 10 individuals. What this mustolid lacks in size, it makes up for in speed and tremendous courage, but that is not why the barbarians avoid it like the plague. They do so because of the disease which all adult Ferbers seem to carry, and that threatens to infect anyone they bite. Then we have the Fae Beast. The Fae Beast is one of the most ferocious, unwavering predators in the region. In terms of physical shape and constitution, it resembles a Yakar or a large dog, but its grey or brown speckled fur is definitely feline. Then we have Hornets. No one knows how many fortune hunters have fallen victims to the Hornets of Davokar, but according to tales told in the taverns of Thistlehold, these tenacious stingers are some of the forest's most effective killers. Then we have the Yakar, a battle-trained Yakar. Battle-trained beasts are quite common among the clans of the region, and none more so than the wolf-like Yakar. The barbarians have tamed these large canines for centuries, and in Clan Odaiova, it is more common than not for every family to train at least one Yakar to guard them at night and keep them company during the day. Then we have the Wild Yakar. The Yakar is a canine, as prone to capturing its own prey as it is eating from cadavers left by other beasts. Then we have the Keller. There are many rumors about the cedar tree known as the Keller. It is true that they pierce the skin of their prey with fine mycelium strands, but they cannot put their victims to sleep, only render them paralyzed for a short while. Then they hold them using their roots. Then we have information on the Lostling. It is said that these lonesome spirit creatures have drifted through the Davokar region since long before the fall of Symbaroum, like tiny wisps of mist, constantly seeking new hosts through which they can relieve the warmth and intimacy they so desperately desire. Then we have the Moose. The Moose is a common sight in bright Davokar, sometimes wandering alone, sometimes accompanied by last year's scalps. Then we have the Mousy Monk. The large red and black patterned Mousy Monk seems to be a species of bear, but it has a venomous gland so powerful that it even serves as a weapon in addition to the beast's fearsome jaws. Then we have information on the creatures in dark Davokar, such as the Blightworm. The abomination known to the barbarian clans as the Blightworm resembles the Kanaran in many ways, but with one clear difference. The front part of the body is split, with two heads at its end. Next we have the Bloodcat. Like meerkats, the Bloodcat is furless, but with skin in shades of orange and purple, and with yellow eyes that always seem to be wide open. It only wants the blood of its prey, which is why it always comes with one or more followers in tow, servile minions, often Yakars or meerkats, who contribute to the hunt and are later allowed to feast on the bloodless carcass. Next we have the Crypt Lord. These are the mummified creatures that Ambrian explorers sometimes come across on their expeditions. Survivors from such encounters describe them as dehydrated, embalmed corpses dressed in rags or armor, whose dilapidated splendor suggests that the owner was once very wealthy. Next we have the Frey Spider. Brownish, grey, and covered with thick, short hairs, these large spider monsters lack the ability to spin webs. Instead, they catch their prey like most four-legged predators, with speed, strength, and cunning. Then we have the Hunger Wolf. The huge Hunger Wolves are some of the most fabled beasts in the Davokar region. They are visually similar to Yakars, but can grow as big as ponies and are as impressively flexible as meerkats. Next we have the Hunting Spider. Hunting spiders are roughly the size of a large dog, with glossy black, hairless bodies and long, thin legs. Next we have the Killer Shrub. Fortune hunters who venture all the way into dark Davokar will soon learn to fear the flesh-eating bush known as the Wriggle Twigs or the Killer Shrub. Then we have the Shelob. The Shelobs, mothers of Davokar's spider creatures, vary in appearance, but their bodies are often the size of an ogre with long, jointed legs. Normally, their compound eyes are about a meter from the ground, but the long legs enable them to rise up and look down on even the tallest of sturdy adventurers. Next we have the Black Plague Termites. The red and black, thumb-length termites attack trees, both living and dead, leaving them hollow. And they are said to corrupt everything they touch, the trees they devour, the ground they tread upon, and the earth in which they nest. Then we have the Wraith. Black, shadow-like figures drifting around alone or in groups. They are drawn to living creatures like flies to rotting meat. They seek affection, sympathy, help, or just someone willing to listen, without realizing that their desperate touch is lethal for the living. Next we have information on the creatures that you can encounter in lakes and rivers, with additional rules on how to handle water combat. First we have the Drilling Leech. The Find Drilling Leech half blind but poisonous, is as big as a cat and surprisingly agile in the water. Moving in clusters, they attach themselves to the hull of boats and eat their way through, hoping that the crew will fall into the water. Next we have the Garug. The giant bear known as the Garug can mainly be found on the islands of Lake Veloma, or hunting in its waters. Its bluish-white fur befits a predator of such icy temperament. Its piercing gaze is enough to make even the bravest wizard flee. Then we have the hammer eel. Fortunately, the immense hammer eel is a rare sight in the rivers of Umbria and Davokar. Such a creature prefers larger lakes like the Volgoma. Usually it preys on other amphibians, but if one grows really big and really hungry, it may also attack seafarers by launching through the water, grabbing them with its short but strong grippers and pulling them below the surface. Next we have the Nipper. The Nipper is a small type of clawed river hunter that often hunts in pairs or groups of up to 5 individuals. Even if it cannot be compared to its more famous relative regarding size, slyness or culinary potential, the Nipper has been the death of many a river roamer. Then we have the Skullan. The large, dark green patterned and warty-toed creature known as the Skullan may not be as impressive as a fully grown king toad, but nevertheless, its paralyzing poison makes it a monster to fear. Next we have the Vapaya. Umbrian parents who worry about their children playing near water often warn them about the Vapaya, but this carnivorous fish actually prefers to stalk vessels on the region's rivers, especially pirate ships, since their attacks always involve 1 or 2 unfortunate souls falling overboard. Then we have information on the creatures of the mountains, such as the brimstone oak. These trees are related to the iron oaks and kelders of Davokar, but coexist with a kind of fungus that generates sulfur and phosphor. Then we have the crystal flies. These silver-white insects form colonies that look like masses of snow, attacking passing creatures in order to lay eggs in their warm bodies. Then we have the Kotka. The mighty Kotka is one of the most feared predators in the Titans. It has thick winter fur of yellowish white with streaks of black across the back, terrible fangs and great claws that can tear even the toughest ogre skin to shreds. Next we have the Mountain Troll. The relatively small, yet very resilient trolls inhabiting the Titans and the Ravens are thought to belong to a different breed than those roaming the lowlands. Next we have the Rockbuck. The Titans and Ravens are home to this enormous and malicious breed of mountain goat. They patrol their territories and furiously defend their mountain passes. Then we have the Snow Wraith. No one knows how many caravans lie buried beneath the snow of the Titans, swallowed by the avalanches and landslides. What is known, however, is that the travelers rarely remain where they fell, a fact that often provides later caravans with unpleasant surprises. An important detail of all of these creatures is that you also have information on how to use different materials extracted from such creatures, like for example you have details on how to create stone boar armor. So next is the stone boar. This huge, ravenous beast is called the stone boar, even if it has no resemblance to other tame or wild boars. If it weren't for its sturdy, leathery hide, in high demand among Umbria's makers of fashionable leather armor, all would probably rather turn and run before risking a bloody confrontation. Then we have the Wraith Owl. The Wraith Owl was named for its plumage, which remains bright white throughout the year, except for the brown or black circles around its eyes and the similarly colored tips of its feathers. They usually make their nests in the ravens, but some have also settled in the ruins of Davokar. It is said that the Wraith Owls hold many treasures that belong to their previous victims. Then we have details on the creatures of the underworld, such as the Cave Ray. A recurrent story from subterranean expeditions tells of large, flat-bodied amphibians stuck in the dark waters of the underworld. They prey on the blind carp and Vearons sharing their habitat, as well as others who come near. There's also the Chasm Stag. From the still pools of blighted sludge, which sometimes come bubbling up through the cracks of the underworld, the insectoid Chasm Stag is born the size of a fox but covered in a hard shell and as ravenous as other abominations. Then we have the Orahog. There have been numerous attempts to catch one of these massive worms alive, in the hope of extracting the extremely corrosive secretion they use to dig through earth and stone. Then we have information on the Pale Crawler. When a wild and confused ogre cannot find its way to civilization, it sometimes ends up in the underworld, among the excrement of trolls and goblins, in corrupting environments that distort their bodies beyond recognition. These desperate creatures climb and crawl on their long, spider-like limbs. Then we have the Rascal. Reports from the larger cave complexes of the underworld state that these are often inhabited by pale bats that can grow very large and are known to Odavs and Carits as Rascals. These flying creatures are big enough to grab and carry off both ogres and trolls. Then we have information on the Wily, the origin of these vaguely elf-like humanoids prowling naked through the underworld, and for how long they have been there is a much debated topic among scholars. They might be a failed Symbaroum experiment, or members of the Iron Pact who were corrupted and distorted in the war against Symbar. We also have the Vearon. The Vearon are cave-dwelling reptiles that can be encountered anywhere in the underworld. They have no eyes. They are covered in milky white scales that darken with age, and can grow up to 5 meters long from snout to tail. And this concludes part 2 of this review. In part 3, the final part of this review, I am going to go through the rules and guidelines with information on how to create your own creatures and monsters, how to create monster chronicles. I am also going to read some fragments from the Game Master supplement included with the Codex, and I will give you my final thoughts concerning the Monster Codex. And of course, in part 3, I am also going to tell you how you can win a PDF of this Symbaroum Monster Codex. The section reviewed in this second part of the review is highly useful mechanically speaking. You do have some details concerning the background and the physical appearance of the different creatures, monsters, beasts, and cultural beings, but it mostly serves as a toolkit of sorts for the Game Master to populate the encounters, the adventures, the campaigns, the entire world of Symbaroum according to the actions of the player characters, the places that they are visiting, and such. And as I hinted earlier, it's also great for you to create your own random encounter tables if you are running co-op or solo Symbaroum games, or if you're a game master who likes to improvise, you could also create all sorts of monster tables using the creatures in this Monster Codex. Well, thanks for watching this part 2 of the review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.